Captain Maria Santos watched the alien fleet disappear into hyperspace, leaving her ship and crew stranded in the void between star systems. The Time's Defiant Explorer *, humanity's first deep space research vessel, drifted helplessly with its engines dead and life support running on backup power. "Captain, they disabled our hyperdrive completely," Chief Engineer Alex Chen reported from his console, his voice tight with controlled anger. "They also fried our communications array and main power coupling. We're running on emergency reserves." The bridge fell silent except for the soft humming of auxiliary systems. 24 hours ago, they had been on a routine scientific mission to study an unusual nebula formation. Then the Cathari ships had appeared without warning, demanding they surrender their vessel and submit to interrogation as suspected spies. When Captain Santos had refused, explaining they were peaceful scientists, the aliens had simply laughed through their translators. The Cathari leader, a reptilian creature with cold yellow eyes, had spoken with casual cruelty. "Humans think they can explore our territory without consequences. You will drift here until your air runs out, and your bones will serve as a warning to others." "How long do we have?" Santos asked, though she dreaded the answer. Dr. Jennifer Walsh, the mission's chief scientist, looked up from her calculations. "With 127 crew members and current consumption rates, maybe 3 weeks of air. Food and water will last longer, but the cold will get us first when the backup power dies." Santos looked around the bridge at her crew. These weren't soldiers or warriors. They were scientists, engineers, and explorers who had volunteered for humanity's first major deep space mission. They had families waiting at home, dreams of discovery, and lives they wanted to live. But as she studied their faces, she didn't see despair. Instead, she saw something that had made humans dangerous throughout their history: determination mixed with righteous anger. "They made a mistake," said Commander James Parker, her second in command. His weathered face wore a grim smile. "They assumed we would just sit here and die quietly." "What are you thinking, Jim?" Santos asked. Parker gestured toward the massive bulk of the ship around them. "The Time's Defiant Explorer Times wasn't built as a warship, but she's got the most advanced human technology ever assembled in one place. Mining equipment that can crack asteroids, manufacturing bays with atomic-level fabricators, a fusion reactor that powers a small city, scientific instruments that can detect a grain of sand from 10 light-years away." Chief Engineer Chen caught on immediately. "You're talking about rebuilding her, not just repairing what they broke, but making her into something new. Something they won't expect," Parker nodded. "Something that can hunt them down and make them regret leaving us alive." Santos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the dropping temperature. "That's assuming we can even get life support fully operational again." "We can do more than that," Chen said, his eyes beginning to gleam with the light of inspiration that Santos had learned to recognize in her crew. "Captain, we've got manufacturing capabilities they probably can't even imagine." The Cathari looked at our ship and saw primitive human technology. They didn't bother to really understand what they were dealing with. Dr. Walsh pulled up a holographic display of the ship's schematics. "Alex is right. We've got resources here that could rebuild civilization on a dead planet. Quantum computers that can simulate entire star systems, nanotechnology that can manipulate matter at the molecular level. The mining arrays alone could strip mine a moon," added Lieutenant Commander Sarah Kim from the weapons console. She wasn't supposed to have weapons to control, but Santos was beginning to think that might change. Santos stood up and walked to the main view screen, staring out at the empty space where their attackers had vanished. The Time's Defiant Explorer Times was huge by human standards, nearly 2 kilometers long and carrying the most advanced technology Earth had ever produced. But it had been built for peace, for discovery, for expanding human knowledge. Now, stranded and left for dead, her crew was talking about turning their ship of science into something else entirely. "If we're going to do this," she said slowly, "we need to be smart about it. The Cathari will expect us to try to repair our ship and escape. They won't expect us to transform it into something that can fight back." "More than fight back," Chen said quietly. "Captain, with the resources we have here, We could build something that would make their entire fleet think twice about attacking humans again. Santos turned back to her crew. Every face on the bridge was looking at her with the same expression. They weren't asking for permission to survive. They were asking for permission to make their attackers regret their cruelty. All department heads to the conference room in 30 minutes, Santos ordered. We're going to plan the complete reconstruction of this ship, and when we're done, the Kethari are going to learn why you don't leave humans stranded with advanced technology and a grudge. Over the next several hours, the conference room became the center of the most ambitious engineering project humans had ever attempted. Department heads from every section of the ship gathered around the holographic display table, their faces illuminated by the soft blue light of projected schematics. Dr. Walsh had compiled a complete inventory of their resources. The numbers were staggering. The Times Defiant Explorer Times carried enough raw materials to build a small fleet of ships. Its manufacturing bays could produce anything from simple tools to complex quantum processors. The fusion reactor provided nearly unlimited power. The Kethari made their first mistake when they assumed human engineering was primitive, Chief Engineer Chen explained as he manipulated the holographic display. Our ship is built using modular construction techniques. Every section can be reconfigured, rebuilt, or replaced. What kind of modifications are you thinking? Asked Dr. Susan Martinez, head of the physics department. Chen smiled grimly. Let's start with the mining arrays. They're designed to crack apart asteroids using focused gravitational fields. With some modifications, those same arrays could tear apart enemy ships. Commander Parker leaned forward. What about the manufacturing bays? We can reprogram them to build weapons systems, armor plating, anything we need, Chen replied. The atomic fabricators can create materials with properties that don't exist in nature. Santos studied the display showing their ship's current configuration. The Times Defiant Explorer Times looked peaceful, almost elegant in its design. Its hull was smooth and white, its sensor arrays extending like graceful wings. It looked exactly like what it was. A ship built for scientific exploration. How long would this take? She asked. If we work around the clock and use every fabricator at maximum capacity, maybe 6 weeks to complete the basic transformation, Chen calculated. But Captain, we're not just talking about adding weapons to a science ship. We're talking about completely rebuilding her into something new. Dr. Walsh brought up new schematics. I've been thinking about the power distribution. Our fusion reactor is already oversized for a ship this class. If we reroute power from the research equipment and reconfigure the energy grid, we could support systems that would normally require a Dreadnought-class vessel. What about the hull? Asked Lieutenant Commander Kim. The manufacturing bays can produce metamaterials that are stronger than anything in Earth's military inventory, Martinez answered. We're talking about armor that can absorb energy weapons, fire, and redistribute it through the ship's systems. Santos felt a strange mix of excitement and apprehension. Her crew wasn't just talking about survival anymore. They were planning to build something that could challenge an entire alien fleet. There's something else to consider, Parker said quietly. The Kethari will eventually come back to check on our wreckage. When they do, we need to be ready for them. How long do you think we have? Santos asked. Based on their behavior patterns, probably 3 to 4 months, Walsh estimated. They seemed confident we would die slowly. But they'll want to confirm the kill and salvage anything useful from our ship, Chen nodded. That gives us time to not just rebuild, but to test our modifications. We can turn the empty space around us into a proving ground. Santos looked around the table at her department heads. These people had volunteered for a peaceful mission of discovery. Now they were planning to transform their ship into something that sounded more like a weapon of war than a scientific vessel. I need to know that everyone understands what we're talking about here, she said seriously. If we do this, we're not just trying to escape. We're building something designed to hunt down and destroy the ships that attacked us. Captain, Dr. Walsh said firmly, they left us here to die slowly and painfully. They wanted to make an example of us to terrorize other humans. I say we give them the example they asked for, just not the one they expected. Any objections? Santos asked, looking at each face around the table. There were none. Then let's begin. Chen, start with life support and main power. I want us breathing easy and warm before we start the major modifications. Martinez, begin calculations for the new hull configuration. Walsh, coordinate with all departments to identify which research equipment we can cannibalize for materials. As the department heads filed out to begin their work, Santos remained behind with Commander Parker. Jim, are we doing the right thing? She asked quietly. Parker was quiet for a long moment, staring at the holographic display still showing their ship's peaceful configuration. Captain, the Cathari attacked us without provocation. They disabled our ship and left us to die not because we threatened them, but because they thought they could. They wanted to make humans afraid to explore space. He turned to look at her directly. If we just escape, we confirm their belief that humans are weak and easy to intimidate. But if we turn their casual cruelty into the worst mistake they ever made, then maybe they'll think twice before attacking the next human ship they encounter. Santos nodded slowly. Then, let's make sure they remember the lesson. Over the next few days, the Time's defiant explorer times became a hive of activity unlike anything in its previous existence. Crew members who had been studying star formations and nebula compositions now worked alongside engineers to strip apart research equipment and repurpose its components. The ship's massive manufacturing bays, previously used to create scientific instruments and replacement parts, began producing components that had never existed before. Armor plating that could redirect energy attacks. Weapon systems that used the same principles as their mining equipment. Sensor arrays that could track ships across multiple star systems. Dr. Walsh found herself working with the engineering teams to design power distribution networks that could handle energy loads far beyond the ship's original specifications. Her knowledge of exotic physics proved invaluable when Chen needed to modify the fusion reactor's output. We're not just upgrading the ship, she told Santos during one of their daily progress meetings. We're rebuilding her using principles that most civilizations never discover. The Cathari think they understand human technology, but they've never seen anything like what we're creating. The most dramatic changes were happening to the ship's external structure. The smooth, elegant hull was being replaced with angular armor plating that could absorb and redistribute energy attacks. The graceful sensor arrays were being rebuilt as multi-purpose systems that could function as both detection equipment and weapon targeting arrays. But perhaps the most significant change was happening in the engineering sections. Chen had completely redesigned the ship's power grid, creating redundant systems that could continue operating even if major sections were damaged. The new configuration could provide enough power to support weapons systems that would normally require multiple ships to operate. Captain, Chen reported during one of their evening briefings, we're ahead of schedule on the major modifications. The new hull configuration is 60% complete, and we've successfully tested the modified mining arrays. The gravitational field generators can now tear apart targets the size of a cruiser. Santos looked at the latest schematics, showing their ship's transformation. The Time's defiant explorer times was becoming something entirely new. Where once it had looked like a peaceful research vessel, it now resembled something that belonged in humanity's nightmares rather than its dreams. What about the manufacturing capabilities? She asked. We've reprogrammed the fabricators to produce ammunition and replacement parts for our new systems, Martinez reported. As long as we have raw materials, we can maintain ourselves indefinitely. And we can get raw materials from any asteroid field or dead planet, Walsh added. The mining arrays can harvest everything we need. Santos stood up and walked to the conference room's window, looking out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the Cathari fleet was continuing its patrol. Confident that the human ship they had left behind was now just a frozen tomb, drifting in space. They had no idea that inside that supposedly dead ship, humans were building something that would change their understanding of what Earth's species was capable of. How much longer? Santos asked. 4 more weeks for the basic transformation, Chen answered. Then another 2 weeks for testing and optimization. Good. When the Cathari return to check on their handiwork, we'll be ready to show them exactly what happens when you leave humans alive with advanced technology and time to think. As her crew continued their work through the night cycles, Santos allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Cathari had thought that stranding them would be easy. that humans would simply accept their fate and die quietly. They were about to learn just how wrong they had been. The transformation of the times, defiant explorer times, progressed faster than anyone had dared to hope. Within 3 weeks of beginning the reconstruction, the ship had become unrecognizable from its original form. Where once smooth white hull plating had reflected starlight, angular black armor now absorbed energy and redirected it through the ship's systems. Chief Engineer Chen stood in the main engineering bay, watching as the last of the original research equipment was stripped away and fed into the atomic fabricators. The machines hummed constantly now, producing components that pushed the boundaries of human engineering beyond anything Earth had ever imagined. "Status report on the gravity well generators?" he called out to his team. "Online and calibrated," replied Engineer Sarah Kim, who had been working non-stop on the weapon systems. "We've successfully tested them on debris at distances up to 50,000 kilometers. The gravitational fields can crush a battleship-sized target in under 30 seconds. Chen nodded with satisfaction. The gravity well generators were perhaps their most innovative creation, born from combining their mining equipment with theoretical physics that Dr. Walsh had been researching. The original mining arrays had used focused gravitational fields to break apart asteroids for resource extraction. Now, those same principles had been amplified and weaponized. "What about the matter disruptors?" he asked. "Fully operational," Kim reported. "We've managed to integrate the quantum manipulation technology from our research labs with the power output from the modified fusion reactor. We can now disassemble enemy ships at the molecular level from a distance of up to 20 kilometers. The matter disruptors were Dr. Martinez's contribution to their growing arsenal. Originally designed for analyzing the composition of distant objects, the quantum manipulation beams could now unmake the bonds that held matter together. It was a weapon that could turn an enemy vessel into its component atoms in seconds." Captain Santos entered the engineering bay, her expression a mixture of awe and concern as she surveyed the work. The familiar hum of the ship's systems had changed over the past weeks, becoming deeper and more menacing. Even the lighting had been modified, casting everything in a red glow that made the formerly peaceful vessel feel like something from humanity's darkest imagination. "How are we progressing on the armor integration?" she asked Chen. "Better than expected," he replied, pulling up a holographic display of the ship's new configuration. "The metamaterial armor plating is now covering 85% of the hull. It's not just protective anymore, Captain. The armor actively absorbs energy attacks and channels that power directly into our weapon systems." Santos studied the display. The ship that appeared in the hologram bore little resemblance to the vessel that had left Earth. The times-defiant explorer times had been long and elegant, its hull smooth and white, its sensor arrays extending like graceful wings. The ship taking shape around them was angular and predatory, its black armor plates overlapping like scales, its weapon arrays protruding from the hull like the teeth of some massive predator. "The psychological impact alone should be significant, Doctor," Walsh observed, joining them at the display. "When the Cathari return, expecting to find our wreckage, they're going to encounter something that looks like it belongs in their nightmares." "Speaking of the Cathari," Santos said, "what's our status on the long-range sensors?" "Online as of yesterday," Walsh replied with evident pride. "We've completely rebuilt the sensor network using quantum entanglement principles. We can now detect ships up to 50 light-years away and track their movements in real time. If a Cathari fleet so much as enters this sector, we'll know about it before they detect us." Chen brought up another section of the display, showing the ship's internal configuration. "We've also completed the reconstruction of the ship's interior. Battle stations are positioned throughout the vessel, with redundant control systems that can operate independently if sections are damaged. Even if they manage to breach our armor and disable primary systems, we can continue fighting from multiple backup locations." The internal changes had been just as dramatic as the external ones. The spacious laboratories and comfortable crew quarters had been replaced with efficient battle stations and compact living spaces. Every available area had been optimized for combat effectiveness. The ship could now operate at full capacity with minimal crew, freeing up personnel for damage control and tactical operations. "What about our manufacturing capabilities?" Santos asked. "This is where things get really interesting," Chen said, his eyes lighting up with enthusiasm. We've reprogrammed the atomic fabricators to work continuously, producing ammunition, replacement parts, and even additional weapon systems. As long as we have raw materials, we can maintain and upgrade ourselves indefinitely. And raw materials are everywhere, added Engineer Kim. The modified mining arrays can strip useful elements from asteroids, dead planets, even space debris. We're essentially self-sufficient now. Santos nodded. But her expression remained thoughtful. That's all impressive. But what about testing? We can't know how effective these modifications are until we face actual combat conditions. We've been thinking about that, Walsh said. There's an asteroid field about 2 light-years from here. We could use it as a testing ground, creating targets that simulate enemy vessels. Do we have the power to reach it? Santos asked. Chen smiled grimly. Captain, our new drive system makes the original hyperdrive look like a child's toy. We've combined the quantum tunnel technology with the modified fusion reactor output. We can now cover distances that would have taken weeks in a matter of hours. Then let's do it. I want full combat trials before the Kethari return. The journey to the asteroid field took 18 hours, but it gave the crew time to familiarize themselves with their transformed ship. Walking through the corridors was like exploring an entirely different vessel. The soft lighting and curved walls of the original design had been replaced with angular passages and harsh red illumination that gave everything an ominous appearance. Commander Parker found himself standing in what had once been the ship's main laboratory, now converted into the primary weapons control center. Banks of displays showed targeting information, power distribution data, and real-time status reports from throughout the ship. It was a command center that would have been impressive on a dedicated warship, let alone what had originally been a peaceful research vessel. It's hard to believe this is the same ship, he commented to Lieutenant Commander Kim, who was running diagnostic checks on the weapon systems. It isn't, she replied. Same hull frame, same basic structure, but everything else is new. We've essentially built a completely different ship inside the skeleton of the old one. Are you confident in the new systems? Kim looked up from her console, her expression serious. Sir, I've been working on military technology for 15 years before joining this mission. What we've built here is beyond anything Earth's military has ever conceived. The theoretical capabilities of these weapons are terrifying. Theoretical? That's why we need these tests. Some of these systems are so advanced that we're not entirely sure what will happen when we use them at full power. Parker considered this as alarms began sounding throughout the ship, indicating their arrival at the asteroid field. Through the viewports, he could see thousands of rocky objects floating in the darkness, ranging from small debris to massive rocks several kilometers across. Captain Santos's voice came over the ship-wide communication system. All stations. We are beginning combat trials. This is not a drill. We're going to test every system we've built under realistic conditions. In the main weapons control center, the crew prepared for their first real test of the ship's new capabilities. Dr. Walsh had used the ship's computers to model enemy vessels based on the recorded specifications of the Kethari fleet, then selected asteroids that matched those sizes and configurations. First, target selected, Kim reported. Asteroid designated Alpha 7, approximately the size and mass of a Kethari cruiser. Range to target? Santos asked, from her position at the main tactical display. 55,000 kilometers, came the reply. Initiate gravity well generator test. Low power setting. Low power setting. The ship seemed to hold its breath as the gravity well generators came online. Through the main view screen, they watched as space around the target asteroid began to distort. The gravitational field was invisible, but its effects were immediately apparent as smaller debris began spiraling toward the center of the distortion. Then the asteroid itself began to buckle. The rock, which had existed unchanged for millions of years, compressed under the artificial gravitational forces until stress fractures appeared across its surface. Increase power to 50%, Santos ordered. The asteroid didn't just break apart. It imploded, crushed by gravitational forces that compressed its mass into a sphere barely 100 meters across. The demonstration lasted less than 30 seconds. "Jesus," whispered someone on the bridge. "Target destroyed," Kim reported, her voice carefully controlled. Gravity well generator operating within normal parameters. Santos felt a chill that had nothing to do with the ship's temperature. The weapon they had just tested could crush any ship in the Cathari fleet without difficulty, and it was only one of several systems they had developed. Next test, Matter Disruptor Array, Target Beta 4. This time they selected an asteroid, rich in metallic elements, similar to the hull composition of Cathari vessels. The matter disruptor beams were nearly invisible, appearing only as subtle distortions in space as they reached out toward the target. When the beams made contact, the asteroid simply ceased to exist. One moment it was there, a solid mass of rock and metal. The next moment, it had been reduced to its component atoms, which dispersed into space as a faint cloud of particles. Target disintegrated, Kim reported. Complete molecular disassembly achieved in 12 seconds. Santos stared at the empty space where the asteroid had been. "Are you telling me that weapon can unmake anything it touches?" "Within its range and power limitations." "Yes," Dr. Martinez confirmed. "We're essentially breaking the bonds that hold matter together at the quantum level." The tests continued for hours. They tried the modified mining arrays, which could now tear apart targets using focused gravitational shear forces. They tested the energy absorption armor by firing simulated attacks at their own hull, watching as the absorbed energy was channeled directly into their weapon systems. They experimented with the quantum sensor array, tracking objects across impossible distances and through various types of interference. Every system exceeded their expectations. "We need to test the self-repair capabilities," Chen suggested as they concluded the weapons trials. Santos nodded. "Simulate hull damage to Section 7. Let's see how quickly the automated systems can respond." They watched on the displays as repair drones emerged from hidden bays throughout the ship, carrying materials produced by the atomic fabricators. The drones worked with mechanical precision, cutting away damaged armor plating and replacing it with new sections that sealed perfectly with the existing hull. "Complete repair cycle achieved in 47 minutes, Chen reported. "That includes manufacturing new armor sections from raw materials. What if we lose the fabricators?" "The drones can cannibalize damaged sections of the ship to repair critical systems. As long as any part of the manufacturing network remains functional, we can maintain basic operations indefinitely." Santos looked around the bridge at her crew. The people who had left Earth as scientists and researchers had become something else during the transformation of their ship. They had become the operators of a vessel that could challenge an entire alien fleet. "Final test," she announced. "Emergency combat readiness. I want to see how quickly we can go from normal operations to full battle status." Alarms began sounding throughout the ship as the crew rushed to their battle stations. Blast doors sealed, isolating critical sections. Weapon systems came online, their targeting arrays scanning for potential threats. The ship's passive sensors went active, flooding the surrounding space with detection beams. "All stations report ready for combat," Commander Parker announced. "Total time from alert to full readiness. 4 minutes, 37 seconds. Acceptable, but we can do better." "Run the drill again." They practiced the combat readiness drill 8 more times, each iteration shaving precious seconds off their response time. By the final run, they could go from peaceful operations to full combat status in under 3 minutes. "Excellent," Santos said finally. "Return to normal operations. Set course for our original position." As the ship's drive systems engaged, preparing to return them to the void where they had been stranded, Santos found herself reflecting on what they had accomplished. In less than 2 months, they had transformed a peaceful research vessel into something that could threaten the most powerful fleets in the galaxy. But more than that, they had proven something about humanity that the Cathari had failed to understand. Humans weren't just curious explorers who could be easily intimidated. When threatened, when cornered, when left with no choice but to fight or die, humans became something far more dangerous. "Captain," Dr. Walsh said quietly, joining her at the main view screen, "there's something you should know about our long-range sensors." "What is it?" "We've been detecting increased Cathari fleet activity in nearby systems. It looks like they're beginning to move patrol routes toward our position." Santos felt her pulse quicken. How long? Based on their current movement patterns, I estimate they'll reach our original position in approximately 3 weeks. Good, Santos said, surprised by the coldness in her own voice. That gives us time to prepare a proper welcome for them. The return journey to their original position took 12 hours, but Santos used the time to plan their strategy. The Kethari would be expecting to find empty space and debris. Instead, they would encounter a ship that had been forged in desperation and fury into something that could challenge their understanding of human capabilities. Commander Parker, I want you to work with Dr. Walsh on developing combat scenarios, Santos ordered as they approached their destination. Assume we're facing the same 3-ship patrol that stranded us originally. What about larger forces? Parker asked. The sensor data suggests they're coming in a larger fleet this time. Probably to salvage whatever they can from our wreckage and to document the fate of the first human deep space mission. Santos smiled grimly. They want to document our fate. I think we should give them exactly what they're asking for. As the Times-defiant explorer Times took position in the same coordinates where they had been abandoned, Santos looked out at the stars and thought about the message they were about to send. The Kethari had attacked them because they thought humans were weak and easily intimidated. In 3 weeks, they would learn just how wrong they had been. The ship settled into a waiting position, its black hull absorbing the starlight, its sensors reaching out across dozens of light years to track the approaching enemy fleet. Inside the transformed vessel, the crew made their final preparations. They had been left for dead in the cold vacuum of space. Now they were ready to show their attackers exactly what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. Fleet Commander Vexathul of the Kethari Imperial Navy stood on the bridge of his flagship, studying the tactical display with satisfaction. His fleet of 12 vessels was approaching the coordinates where they had left the human ship to die 3 months earlier. Today's mission was simple: confirm the destruction of the primitive vessel and collect whatever technology samples remained. Any debris detected? He asked his sensor operator, a younger Kethari whose scales still held the bright green of inexperience. Scanning now, Commander. I'm detecting something unusual. Vexthul's yellow eyes narrowed. Elaborate. There appears to be a large object at the coordinates where we left the human vessel. But the sensor readings are strange. The mass is roughly equivalent to the original ship, but the energy signature is completely different. Show me. The main display activated, showing long-range sensor data from their target location. Vexthul studied the readings for several moments before dismissing them with a contemptuous gesture. Sensor malfunction. The human ship was disabled beyond repair. Run a full diagnostic on the detection array. Yes, sir. But Commander, the readings are consistent across all our sensor platforms. Vexthul was about to respond when his communications officer interrupted. Sir, incoming message from Imperial Command. Priority 1. On screen, the holographic image of Admiral Kethvor materialized above the tactical display. His scarred features twisted into a scowl. Commander Vexthul, you will investigate the human vessel thoroughly before proceeding with salvage operations. Intelligence suggests these creatures may be more resourceful than initially believed. Respectfully, Admiral, the human ship was completely disabled. There is no possibility of... There is every possibility. Kethvor's voice carried the authority of someone who had not survived decades of warfare by underestimating enemies. 3 other human vessels have been detected in sectors where our forces reported destroying them. Somehow, these creatures are not dying as easily as expected. Vexthul felt a flicker of unease but maintained his composure. Understood, Admiral. We will proceed with full caution. See that you do. If the humans have somehow survived, I want them captured alive this time. The Imperial Council wants to understand how they've managed to escape destruction. The transmission ended, leaving Vexthul staring at the tactical display. The idea that the humans could have survived 3 months in disabled ship was absurd, but Admiral Kethvor had not achieved his position by being overly cautious without reason. Reduce speed to 1/4 impulse, he ordered. Deploy long-range scanning probes. I want detailed information on that object before we approach. 2 hours later, the probe data began streaming back to the fleet, and Vexthul felt his confidence begin to waver. The object at the target coordinates was definitely artificial, roughly the same size and mass as the human research vessel, but according to the probes, its configuration was completely different from the ship they had disabled. "This makes no sense," muttered his tactical officer. "The hull configuration bears no resemblance to the original vessel. The materials are unknown. The energy readings suggest power output far beyond what the humans demonstrated previously. Could they have been rescued?" Vexthal asked. "No, sir. Our long-range monitors would have detected any ships entering this sector. Whatever that object is, it's been here the entire time." Vexthal studied the probe data more carefully. The object's surface appeared to be covered in some kind of dark, angular armor plating. Strange protrusions extended from various points on the hull, resembling weapon arrays but unlike anything in Kethari databases. Most disturbing of all, the energy readings suggested the object was actively scanning his fleet. "Sir," his sensor operator called out, voice tight with concern, "the object has just gone to active scanning. It knows we're here." Impossible. At this range, their primitive sensors could not. "Sir, they're scanning us with quantum entanglement beams. That's technology we've never encountered before." Vexthal felt cold fear beginning to creep up his spine. Quantum entanglement scanning was theoretical even for the Kethari Empire. If the humans had somehow developed it, all ships, battle stations, approach the target with weapons ready. "Should we attempt communication?" his communications officer asked. "No. If by some miracle the humans survived, they're probably desperate and dangerous. We'll capture them and their vessel intact." The 12 ships of Vexthal's fleet arranged themselves in a standard attack formation and began their approach. At 50,000 kilometers, their own sensors began providing detailed information about the object they were approaching. What they saw defied all logic. The graceful white hull of the human research vessel was gone, replaced by something that looked like it had been forged in the darkest nightmares of spacefaring civilizations. Angular black armor covered every surface, absorbing light and energy. Weapon arrays protruded from the hull like the fangs of some massive predator. The entire vessel radiated an aura of barely contained violence. "That's not the same ship," whispered the tactical officer. "It has to be," Vexthal said, but his voice lacked conviction. "Ships don't just transform themselves." "Sir, incoming transmission from the target vessel." On screen, the image that appeared on the main display sent a shock through every Kethari on the bridge. It was definitely a human, but not the defeated, desperate creature they had expected to find. Captain Santos stood on what appeared to be a military command bridge, her uniform crisp, her bearing confident. Behind her, the bridge bustled with activity as crew members operated sophisticated equipment. "This is Captain Maria Santos, of the Earth vessel Times Defiant Explorer *", she said, her voice carrying clearly across the void. "You left us here to die 3 months ago. We'd like to thank you for that." Vexthal stared at the transmission in confusion. "Thank us? For what?" Santos smiled, and there was something in that expression that made Vexthal's blood run cold. "For giving us the time and motivation to rebuild our ship into something more appropriate for the kind of galaxy we've discovered." "Impossible. Your ship was disabled beyond repair. Your technology is primitive compared to ours." "You're right about one thing," Santos replied. "Our ship was disabled beyond repair. So we didn't repair it. We rebuilt it into something better. Something designed specifically for hunting down Kethari fleets." Vexthal gestured for his weapons officer to prepare firing solutions, but kept his expression neutral. "You're bluffing. 12 ships against 1, even if you've made modifications." 12 ships, Santos repeated thoughtfully. "Let me show you what we think of those odds." The transmission ended, and immediately Vexthal's tactical display erupted in warnings. The human ship had just activated what appeared to be weapon systems, but the energy readings were beyond anything in Kethari experience. "Sir, they're charging some kind of gravitational field generator. The energy output is enormous." 2. All ships, open fire immediately. The Kethari fleet unleashed everything they had at the strange black vessel. Energy beams, plasma torpedoes, and kinetic projectiles filled the space between the fleets. Any normal ship would have been vaporized by the concentrated firepower. Instead, the human vessel's black armor absorbed the incoming energy and seemed to grow brighter, as if feeding on the attack. The kinetic projectiles struck the hull and simply disappeared, their matter somehow converted into energy that the ship's systems absorbed. "Our weapons are having no effect," reported the tactical officer. "The enemy hull is actually absorbing our attacks." Before Vex's Thul could respond, the human ship fired its first weapon. A focused gravitational field reached out across 50,000 kilometers of space and struck the Kethari cruiser times Iron Fang Asterisk. The massive warship, over 800 meters long and armed with enough firepower to level a city, was crushed into a sphere barely 30 meters across in less than 20 seconds. Silence fell over Vex Thul's bridge as they watched 1,100 crew members die in an instant. "Evasive maneuvers!" Vex Thul screamed. "All ships, emergency dispersal pattern." The fleet scattered, but the human ship seemed to anticipate their movements. A second weapon fired, this one sending out beams that barely registered on their sensors. When the beams struck the destroyer times Swift Death Asterisk, the ship simply came apart at the molecular level, its atoms dispersing into space like dust. "What kind of weapons are those?" demanded the tactical officer. Before anyone could answer, the human ship did something that defied all understanding of space combat. It folded space around itself and appeared instantly next to the Kethari battleship times Conquering Blade Asterisk, moving faster than any ship they had ever encountered. At point-blank range, the human vessel unleashed weapons that turned the proud battleship into scrap metal in seconds. Gravitational shears tore through the hull like paper. Matter disruptor beams unmade entire sections of the ship. Energy absorption fields drained the Kethari vessel's power and used it to fuel even more devastating attacks. "Fleet Commander, this is Captain Vortak of the Times Steel Talon Asterisk," came a panicked transmission. "We need to retreat immediately. This isn't a battle. It's a slaughter." Vex Thul wanted to argue, but as he watched the human ship destroy another 2 vessels, while simultaneously absorbing attacks from the remaining fleet, he realized that Vortak was right. Somehow, impossibly, the humans had built something that could single-handedly destroy an entire Kethari battle fleet. "All ships, emergency jump to hyperspace. Get us out of here." "Sir, the human ship is jamming our hyperdrive systems. We can't escape." The tactical display showed the terrifying truth. The human vessel was generating some kind of field that prevented their ships from entering hyperspace. They were trapped with a predator that could destroy them at will. "Sir," his communications officer said quietly, "incoming transmission from the human ship." On screen, Captain Santos appeared again, but this time she was standing on what appeared to be an observation deck, looking out at the Kethari fleet through massive windows. Behind her, the black hull of her ship stretched away into the distance, its weapon arrays tracking the scattered enemy vessels. "Fleet Commander Vex Thul," she said, somehow knowing his name and rank, "you're probably wondering how we managed this. The answer is simple. You made the mistake of leaving humans alive with advanced technology and time to think." "This is impossible," Vex Thul said. "Your species is primitive. Your technology is centuries behind ours." "You're absolutely right," Santos agreed. 3 months ago, everything you just said was true. But here's something you didn't understand about humans. When we're threatened, when we're cornered, when someone tries to kill us and our families, we don't just fight back, we evolve. She gestured toward the tactical display that showed her ship surrounded by the wreckage of his fleet. "This vessel represents 3 months of human ingenuity, focused by human anger. We took our peaceful research ship and turned it into something that your worst nightmares couldn't imagine." "What do you want?" Vex Thul asked, his voice barely above a whisper. "I want you to deliver a message," Santos replied. "To your fleet commanders, your admirals, your emperor, and anyone else who thinks humans are easy prey. Tell them about what happened here today. Tell them about the research ship that became a nightmare. Tell them that humanity remembers every attack, every insult, every act of unprovoked aggression." She paused, her eyes fixed directly on Vex Thul through the transmission. "Tell them that the next time they encounter a human vessel, They should ask themselves one question. Is this ship what it appears to be? Or is it something we built to hunt you? You're letting us go? Vexthal asked, confused. I'm sending you home with a message. Your hyperdrive inhibitors will shut down in exactly 1 hour. That should give you time to recover the survivors from your destroyed ships and collect enough wreckage to prove what happened here. The transmission ended, and Vexthal stood on his bridge, staring at the tactical display. Of his 12 ships, only 6 remained operational. The others were either completely destroyed or so heavily damaged that they would never fight again. And through it all, the black human vessel hung motionless in space, its weapons tracking his remaining ships but not firing. It could destroy them all without effort, but instead, it was letting them go. Sir, his sensor operator said quietly. Additional human ships are appearing on long-range sensors. At least 40 vessels, all showing similar energy signatures to this one. Vexthal felt his legs give out as he collapsed into his command chair. 40 ships like this one could destroy the entire Kethari Imperial Navy. If the humans had somehow built a fleet of these monsters, sir, the jamming field is dropping. We can jump to hyperspace now. Do it. Get us out of here immediately. As his remaining ships prepared to jump, Vexthal took one last look at the human vessel. It looked like something that had crawled out of the deepest nightmares of every spacefaring species. Black, angular, predatory, it represented everything the galaxy had learned to fear about the darkness between the stars. And the humans had built it. The Kethari fleet jumped to hyperspace, fleeing toward their home systems with news that would shake the Empire to its foundations. Behind them, the Time's defiant explorer Times remained in position, its sensors tracking their departure and ensuring they did not return. On the bridge of the transformed vessel, Captain Santos watched the enemy fleet disappear and allowed herself a moment of satisfaction. The Kethari had thought that stranding them would be easy, that humans would die quietly and serve as a warning to others. Instead, they had created something that would serve as a warning to every hostile species in the galaxy. The message was simple. Humans could be peaceful explorers and scientists when left alone. But when threatened, when attacked, when pushed too far, they became something far more dangerous. Captain, Commander Parker said quietly. Think they'll actually deliver the message? Santos smiled grimly. They'll deliver it. The question is whether anyone will believe it until they see one of our ships for themselves. And when they do, then they'll learn the same lesson the Kethari just learned. Don't attack humans unless you're prepared to face the consequences. Dr. Walsh approached from her station at the science console. Captain, I'm detecting massive fleet movements throughout Kethari space. It looks like they're recalling ships from their border patrols and consolidating their forces. Good, Santos said. Fear makes people cautious. Caution keeps them from attacking innocent ships. She looked out at the stars, thinking about the implications of what they had accomplished. The Time's defiant explorer Times had been humanity's first deep space research vessel, sent out to expand human knowledge and make peaceful contact with alien civilizations. Now it was something else entirely. A demonstration of what humans were capable of when their survival was threatened. A message written in twisted metal and dark energy that would spread throughout the galaxy. Set course for Earth, Santos ordered. It's time to go home and tell them what we've learned about the galaxy. And more importantly, what the galaxy is about to learn about us. As the transformed ship engaged its drive systems and disappeared into the quantum tunnel toward Earth, it left behind empty space and debris. But it also left behind something else. The knowledge that humanity was no longer just another primitive species taking its first tentative steps into the galaxy. The Kethari had thought that stranding them would be easy. They had learned, too late, that leaving humans alive with advanced technology and time to think was the worst mistake they could possibly make. The lesson would spread throughout the galaxy, carried by survivors and witnesses, growing with each telling until it became legend. And every time a hostile species encountered a human vessel, they would remember the story of the research ship that became a terror. They would remember, and they would think twice before pulling the trigger. In the end, that was exactly the lesson Captain Santos and her crew had wanted to teach.